Hi friends, hello. Welcome to Crack UPSC CSC with India's largest online learning platform, an academy. Today we are going to discuss very important topic for UPSC Civil's mains perspective, that is analysis of Office of the President. Generally, the questions may be asked with regard to the Office of the President in mains in this way, such as is President of India mere rubber stamp? What is the significance and importance of the office of the president in the constitutional system of India? What are the discretionary powers of the president? What are the issues with regard to clemency powers of the president? Like that, questions may be asked with regard to the office of the president in mains. We will discuss this important topic. What you will get from an academy: daily live classes, live tests, quizzes, structured courses, and unlimited access to videos on civil service mains and prelims. And you will be getting videos on subjects such as polity, ethics, economy, geography from both mains as well as prelims perspective. You subscribe 12 months. It will be 44,000. In this, you will get the entire course material, entire course, then unlimited tests. You use my promo code, that is capital KIRAN, you will get 10% discount. And if you subscribe 24 months, it will be all the more beneficial for you, because just at 64,000, you can subscribe 24 months. And in this 64,000 also, you will get 10% discount if you use my promo, that is capital KIRAN. Out for 20, 64,000, you will get 10% discount, and at 57,600, you will get 24 months subscription. The UPSC lays trap to the aspirants, asking the question that is President of India mere rubber stamp? Is President of India mere rubber stamp? Most of us may tend to fall in this trap, saying that the President of India is mere rubber stamp. No, he does have constitutional as well as circumstantial discretion. In the context of these constitutional and circumstantial discretion powers, no way we can term the President of India as mere rubber stamp. We will examine what are these constitutional and circumstantial discretionary powers. Many of us, we tend to make this mistake, assuming ourselves that the President of India does not have any constitutional discretionary, but he does have constitutional discretionary powers. First, Article 78, it consists of three provisions. First provision, Article 78A, it is the duty of the Prime Minister to convey the President of the important legislative and administrative decisions of the Union. It is duty of the Prime Minister to convey the President of the important legislative and administrative decisions of the Union. That is Article 78A. Then Article 78B says, there shall be, if the President asks so, it is the duty of the Prime Minister to furnish such information that is required by the president. For instance, the president asks the prime minister to furnish particular information with regard to the administrative and legislative decisions of the union government. The president needs to furnish. For instance, in the immediate aftermath of Indira Gandhi assassination, there were Sikh riots in which thousands of Sikhs were unfortunately killed, raped, their shops were looted. On this unfortunate incident, Justice Nanavati Commission was constituted. Nanavati Commission submitted its report, and the then President Jnani Jail Singh wanted the then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi to make findings of Justice Nanavati Commission public. But the government of the day refused. The situation went up to constitutional deadlock. The then president, thought of impeaching the Council of Ministers, and then government thought of impeaching president himself, because at that time Congress had the largest majority, that is triple four, 444 in Parliament, sorry, in Lok Sabha, and two-third majority in Rajya Sabha. Such is the significance of Article 78 Provision B. But friends, always remember, by utilizing Article 78B, the President cannot ask the Prime Minister to furnish the details about his, party activities. The details about his party activities or the confidential matter about his party or party members. Then Article 78 Provision C says, if the President asks so, it is the duty of the Prime Minister to lay the matter in front of Council of Ministers, on which the decision has already been taken, but it is not considered by Council of Ministers. The decision has already been taken, but it is not considered by Council of Ministers. Prime Minister, in a hasty manner, sometimes he may take some important decision without consulting his cabinet colleagues. Ours is parliamentary form of government. Unlike presidential form of government, where the entire authority of the government is centered in a single hand, that is president, in parliamentary form of government, authority of the government has been percolated amongst the cabinet. Prime Minister commonly is first among the equals. Hence, important decisions according to the norms of parliamentary form of government are to be taken in consultation with his cabinet colleagues. That's why recently Telangana High Court posed a question to Advocate General that before demolishing the vital structure, that is the state secretariat, did Chief Minister consult his cabinet colleagues and furnish the details of cabinet meeting? Documental evidence that the cabinet meeting was held in this regard, and cabinet collectively took the decision to demolish it. Such is the importance of consultation by the Prime Minister at union level, by the Chief Minister at state level, with their respective cabinets when they take important decisions. So if Prime Minister is to take any important decision without consulting his cabinet colleagues, this Article 78 Provision C can be used. Then the President's power to address both the houses of Parliament. We need to distinguish the difference between Article 86 and Article 87. In Article 87 also, the President delivers speeches or the president deliver, what do you say, address to the parliament. But the differences are that in Article 87, the president delivers speeches only in some special circumstances, such as first session after general elections and the first session in the new year. That is one first difference. Second, the address delivered by the president under Article 87 is purely on the advice of Council of Ministers. That means the address that is delivered by the president is prepared by Council of Ministers. On the other hand, the address that is delivered by the president under Article 86 is delivered by the president in his discretion, not on the advice of Council of Ministers. And second, under Article 86, the president can address Parliament at any point of time, not on special occasion. Even if the regular sessions of Parliament are not going on, in a year, generally there will be three parliamentary sessions: monsoon sessions, budget sessions, and winter sessions. If if there is no regular session of the parliament is going on, even despite of that, the president can summon both the houses of parliament. Special session has to be summoned when president utilizes Article 86. Special session has to be summoned, and the president can, what do you say, address either house of the parliament or both the houses of parliament. And even if he has any difference of opinion, that can also be conveyed to the parliament. No president of India, fortunately, utilized this. Otherwise, the government of the day will be blamed in public gain. Then Article 140, president can seek advice from Supreme Court with regard to any matter of law or fact which is of public importance. Then Article 201, the president can summarily reject or veto the state bills that are reserved by the governor for the consideration of the UPA government was notorious for misutilizing this article. Here, three important things we need to remember. One, the president need not to state the reasons if he rejects the state bill that has been reserved by the government. That is first. Second, there is no time limit mentioned in the constitution within which president needs to convey his decision, whether he is accepting or rejecting the bill. And third, the president has absolute veto power. That means he can reject the bill. Any bill can be reserved by the governor of the state for the consideration of the president. Even money bills can also be reserved by the governor of the state for the consideration of the president. And president has absolute veto powers even on state money bills that have been reserved by the governor for the consideration of the president. Of course, he cannot send the state money bills that have been reserved by the governor for reconsideration, but he does have absolute veto powers over state money bills that have been reserved by the governor for the consideration of the president. Hence, the governor and the president together can make a duly elected state legislature defunct, useless. They can make the duly elected legislative assembly to sink in atrophy. When Narendra Modi was chief minister of Gujarat, the Gujarat Legislative Assembly legislated a law with regard to local body. Gujarat Assembly legislated a law that whoever does not vote in municipal elections and in state legislative assembly elections, sorry, in municipal elections or panchayat elections, some penalty will be imposed on such kind of voter. Without any valid reason, if any voter abstains from voting in panchayat or municipalities, that voter will be penalized. Penalty will be such as the voter may not, what do you say, depart from utilizing the government schemes like that, government subsidies. Then the governor of Gujarat at that time, by using Article 200, reserved the bill for the consideration of the president. The then president never took any decision on this particular bill. Automatically, that bill was killed. In such manner, UPA 1 and UPA 2 governments have killed so many state bills in this manner. That is the significance of Article 200 and Article 201. That much of discretionary powers are bestowed on president with regard to state bills. Of course, in Canadian Constitution, the president can directly take away the state bills for his consideration without the involvement of the governor. But here, the governor needs to reserve the bill for the consideration of the president. Anyhow, since governor functions under the directions of the president, president may direct the governor to reserve state bills for his consideration. But there are some bills, state bills, which ought to be compulsorily reserved by the governor for the consideration of the president. For instance, the state bills which impose restriction on interstate commerce, state bills which impose restriction on freedom of interstate commerce under Article 304, then the state bills which negatively impacts the authority of the High Court of the state, or state bills which deal with any matter under Article 31A, that is compulsory acquisition of property for public purpose. These bills ought to be compulsorily reserved by the governor for the consideration of the president. But unfortunately, in previous instances, scrupulous, what you say, governors, they reserved many bills by misutilizing Article 200. Then comes Article 103. The president can decide the questions of disqualification of members of parliament. Of course, this particular function is not in pure discretion of the president. In this instance, the president needs to act according to the advice given by election commission. Yet, of course, in this instance, the president doesn't act on the advice given by council of ministers. In fact, he acts on the advice given by election commission, and the advice given by election commission in this regard is binding on the president. The advice given by election commission in this regard is binding on the president. Then circumstantial discretionary powers. Circumstantial discretionary powers. What do you mean to say circumstantial discretionary powers? The president will have discretionary powers depending on particular circumstance. So what are they? In case of strong assembly, whom to form the government? In case of fractured mandate, no party got majority. Hence, whom to invite to form the government? Of course, in this regard, M.M. Poonchi Commission laid down the guidelines, but they are only suggestion in nature. But in Constitution, nowhere it is mentioned what President ought to do in case of hung assembly, whom to invite to form the government. So in this case, the discretion lies with the president. Then if the Council of Ministers loses no confidence motion and before resigning, the Council of Ministers advises the president to dissolve Lok Sabha. Are you getting? The Council of Ministers lost majority in Lok Sabha. No confidence motion was introduced by the opposition. Because of lack of majority in Lok Sabha, Council of Ministers lost. It got defeated. It got defeated. Hence, it has to resign. Before resigning, the Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister advised President to dissolve Lok Sabha. Dissolve means it is the end of the life of Lok Sabha. We need to go for fresh election. The Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister can advise the President under Article 85 to dissolve Lok Sabha. Right? The President thinks that the opposition can form the government or opposition coalition can form the government. Hence, unnecessary public expenditure can be prevented by going for fresh elections. President, without heeding to the advice given by Council of Ministers, he can request the opposition party or opposition coalition to form the government. He need not to act in this instance on the advice of Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister. Then, if Council of Ministers avoiding Lok Sabha with the fear of no confidence motion, if the government is surviving by thin majority and some of the members of ruling party have defected to opposition party or they resign, then the government fears defeat in Lok Sabha. Because of that defeat, on some pretext or the other, it is avoiding the Lok Sabha, convening the sessions of the Lok Sabha. It is avoiding summoning the sessions of Lok Sabha in time. Then the president can ask the Council of Ministers to prove its majority in the House. Then, if incumbent Prime Minister dies suddenly, the present Prime Minister who is in the office dies suddenly, whom to appoint as Prime Minister? In this instance also, the discretionary power lies with the President. It is not written in the Constitution that only the member from ruling party should be appointed as Prime Minister. Because sometimes what happens, the Prime Minister may be public figure. Because of his clout, the members of the party may be supporting, or some other, party which is coalition partner of the ruling coalition may be supporting because of the personality of the Prime Minister. Like when A.B. Vajpayee was Prime Minister of India, many coalition parties, they supported BJP because of the soft nature of A.B. Vajpayee. So in such instance, if unfortunately the Prime Minister dies, the partners of ruling coalition, we say, uh, ruling coalition may depart from the ruling coalition. In such instances, the president may appoint the person whom he in whom he reposes the confidence that he can form the government and he can run the government successfully. Then, very, very important function of the president is clemency powers of the president. In recent times, just 2-3 years ago, clemency powers of the president have become controversial because the terrorists who have been convicted in costly terrorist act, the guilt will be proved and they will be awarded death sentence in Supreme Court, the highest appellate authority of the country. Then the terrorists will apply for mercy petition to the president. The president does not take any action because these powers of the president ought to be exercised on the advice of Council of Ministers. Always remember, friends, clemency powers of the president are not exercised in the discretion of the president. They need to be exercised on the advice of Council of Ministers. So, Council of Ministers never advises the president neither to accept nor to reject. If they accept, they will be blamed in public opinion or public glare. They do not reject because for appeasement politics. So this thing used to go on happening for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. The mercy petitions used to languish before the president. After 10, 15 years of languishing before the president, then so-called human rights activists will come. It is a violation of human rights. The terrorists, they are languishing in jail by, what do you say, their mercy petitions being languished in before the president. No action was taken. Hence, they cannot be executed now. They should not be, what do you say, executed with death sentence. Death sentence should be invariably be converted into life imprisonment because of this delay in the mercy petition, decision on mercy. This state of affairs used to go on, and this state of affairs happened for the past 1.5 to 2 decades. In my Hyderabad, in our Telangana, we have one Telugu daily called Eenadu, very famous in our Telugu language. So in that paper, every day there will be a column by a costumed, a cartoonist called Sridhar, a funny column. So some 5 to 6 terrorists have been convicted by Supreme Court in costly and gory terrorist attacks in which hundreds of innocent people died. These 4 or 5 terrorists were coming out of Supreme Court, and one among the terrorists says he heaves relief sigh. He heaves a relief sigh. Abba, मुझे तो फांसी हो, I need not to bother about my life because I have been convicted with a sentence. So I am saved. My life is assured. Are you getting? These terrorists were convicted by Supreme Court and they were awarded with a sentence. They were coming out of the Supreme Court and one of them gives relief. वाह, मेरा जान का तो कुछ खतरा नहीं क्योंकि मुझे फांसी लगा। फांसी लगे तो फांसी तो एग्जीक्यूट नहीं होगा ना, precipitations. So this was the state of affairs for the past two decades. Many times Supreme Court, many times in UPSC mains, 2-3 times, questions being asked in quality paper with regard to clemency powers of the president. That's why we are going to discuss in our session the Supreme Court guidelines in Kehar Singh case with regard to clemency powers of the president. First, convicted person cannot, what do you say, here there's a spelling mistake by my DTP operator. Please excuse me, the convicted person do not have the right to oral hearing. Convicted person do not have the right to oral hearing. The convicted person do not have, the convicted person doesn't have right to oral hearing. The convicted person doesn't have right to oral hearing. That means his mercy petition should be filed in written document form. By orally, he cannot apply. And Supreme Court opined in this case that there is no need to lay down any guidelines with regard to clemency powers of the President. Supreme Court opinion that it need not to lay any guidelines with regard to the clemency powers of the President. And the clemency powers of the President need to be exercised on the advice of Council of Ministers. The clemency powers of the President need to be exercised on the advice of Council of Ministers. So these powers of the President need to be exercised in, what to say, according to the advice of Council of Ministers. Then the President can examine the evidences and facts of the case afresh, and he can take a different opinion other than the, you say, the Supreme Court's opinion. So he can examine, the President can examine the facts and evidences of the case afresh, and he can take the different opinion irrespective of Supreme Court's judgment. So these are the guidelines of Supreme Court in Kehar Singh case with regard to clemency powers of the President. Thank you, friends. Use my promo code and get 10% discount. And if you want these PPTs, you please subscribe to share this post Telegram link. Thank you. Thanks a lot.